I guess I should introduce myself. Again, my name is Jim Narangajavana. I'm one of the co-founders for C2 Education. And we are so happy to have you here with us today. Throughout everything that's happened, we've remained firmly committed to helping our students to make sure that our students continue to learn, do not get brain drain, and that they are continually moving towards their goals, even with some of the things that might have been put on hold with this current pandemic. At the end of the day, a lot of the goalposts, a lot of the deadlines, matriculating to college, those things have not changed. So a lot of things that our students will have to do are now going to be compressed into a smaller timeline. So we have to keep going, and it is our goal to continue to help our students. So today we're going to be talking about the changes to the AP. Let me go ahead and share this presentation. And as we go through, I will be doing the talking. If you can, please mute your microphones. At the very end, we'll have a Q&A session where as we go through, if you have any questions, you can ask them at the end. Also, there's a chat box. Now, I have to admit, as I'm going through the presentation, I don't know if I'll be paying a lot of attention to the chat box, but at the very end, I'll scroll through and read through the chat box, and we'll try to answer each of your questions. As we go through this, if you have questions, maybe have a piece of paper next to you and just jot down those questions as well. And we'll go ahead and get started. Let me just do one more thing. I'm going to turn off the chime. Okay. Okay. So, by the way, let me quickly ask a question. Can you see when I move my mouse around, or should I turn on the laser pointer here? Can you see where my mouse is going?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. That will save me a lot of time. Okay, so let's talk about the 2020 AP exams. Now, this is a question I usually like to ask the audience. Whenever I do a webinar or I go in person to a college fair or seminar, sometimes kids will come up to me afterwards and they'll ask me, you know what, I am struggling in my current math class or my current honors class, and I'm not quite sure if I should take the AP, the next level of this math class or this, this AP class, because I'm worried about getting a B in the class or worse. So do you think it's better to get an A in an honors class when it comes to the college applications, or B in an AP class? I just want to kind of throw this out at you real quickly, give you 5 seconds to think about it. Do you think it's better to get an A in an honors class, a B in an AP class, or other? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's better to get an A in the AP class. That's the answer I always give to my students, because I understand their mindset. They are currently struggling, and maybe all that they can see in front of them is more struggle. But sometimes when we're in that mindset, when we're in a tough place, we can't really see what's beyond it. And it's really important for us to kind of take a step back and maintain a positive mindset and say, you know what? If we get the right help and the right preparation, then we can do it. We can get an A in the AP class. All it takes is the right coaching, the right preparation, and a lot of hard work, right? So that's why I try to tell my students, we can get you an A in the AP class. You just need to get the right help you need so that you can work smarter, not harder. And as we're talking about having a positive mindset, it is so important for us to stay positive right now. So whenever you have a mindset where maybe you're asking yourself, why should I do this? Or, can I do this? You need to just kind of tell yourself, well, you know what? This is something that I have to do anyway. You have to do well on the APs. You have to get good grades. So change the question to, how can I do this? And once you kind of change the question to how can I do it, you put yourself in that mindset, then it becomes a lot easier to think about the steps you need to take to be able to do well in that class. Okay, so with that in mind, keeping a positive mindset, as we go through this, I'll tell you some do's and don'ts, or as Tomer might say, don'ts. And let's get started. So we're going to talk about changes in the timing and test format, how to prepare and access resources, exam scoring and earning credit, exam security and technology issues. Probably we'll spend more time on kind of the timing, the test format, and how to prepare. And then at the very end there, I forgot to add here, is the SAT and ACT possibly being online, okay? So changes in time. And by the way, as we go through this, remember this is just a 30-minute webinar, so I won't be going really, really greatly in depth, but feel free to type in those questions to the chat, and we can also maybe queue up for some kind of future webinar if you want something in more detail, okay? So we will continue to do these Wednesday webinars. So changing time and test format, first of all, it is, these are the May test dates, and I've taken this slide from the College Board to kind of show you when the tests are. The important thing to remember about this is if you can take the test in May, you should take the test in May, okay? There are May test dates and June test dates, but then that's it. You only have May and June. As you can notice here, each test basically has its own time slot, right? So there are no conflicts for most of the tests in May, and that's why you should try to take it in May. The only conflict you might have is if you just happen to be taking Japanese language and Italian language, now you can only take one of these two language tests in May, and you will have to take the other one in June, right? But for everything else though, each date, each test has its own slot, so you should try to take it in May, And the other thing I want to point out really quickly is that the majority of these tests are going to consist of 2 questions. Usually one question is about 25 minutes, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. And the other one will be 15 minutes. The only exceptions are these tests right here that I've put in purple. These are tests that have 1 question, okay? And they consist of, here you see the English exams, English literature and composition, English language and composition. These consist of one essay, 1 question, and that's going to be for 45 minutes. And then these history exams, or these history courses as well, European history, United States history, and world history modern, these will consist of a single question. There'll be a document-based question, or a DBQ, and these may have 5 documents or so. Okay, but everything else will basically consist of 2 questions. And when it comes to language tests, these tests will have 2 questions as well, but they might not take the same amount of time. They might be, they're listening questions, and they might take maybe up to 30 minutes or so, okay? So moving on quickly, June test dates. As you can see here, this is why you do not want to take tests in June unless you have to, because there are a lot of conflicts. So if you happen to be taking Latin and Calculus BC, and you couldn't take one of these beforehand in May, then you're pretty much stuck, right? There will not be any other tests. So if you can, try to take the tests in May. And these June makeup dates are reserved for usually if you have technical issues or just something unexpected comes up, like your computer just, it just fries for some reason in May, then this is the makeup date. Okay, talking about timing, one of the confusing things possibly about the tests that are going to be next week and the week after is the timing. So it's really important as you prepare to really get used to the timing and to know what to expect. So when you log in, you are expected, even though the tests might take around 45 to 50 minutes of work, you will have to log in at least 30 minutes early, right? So you want to log in 30 minutes before the start time. And one thing I didn't quite mention is these tests, they're being taken around the world at the very same time. So hopefully there aren't any bandwidth issues or technical difficulties, but you never know. So that, again, that's why you want to take it in May. And so also with this, you want to log in 30 minutes early. You'll have to kind of fill in some information. If we look at a 2-question exam here, the first question, you will have 25 minutes to develop a response and then 5 minutes to submit it. So I'm going to show you this in more detail on the next slide, but this might be confusing because when you log in, you might see on the timer, it might say 30 minutes, right? But you really only have 25 minutes. And when you're preparing for this test next week and the week after, you need to prepare and time yourself with 25 minutes. Same thing for the question number 2. You've got 15 minutes to develop an answer and then 5 minutes to submit it, okay? So you have to prepare that way. And then for the questions, the exams that have only one question, it's 45 minutes to prepare and develop a response, and you know, then 5 minutes to submit your response. Okay, so when you look at this, this clock will count down from, you know, possibly 30 minutes, and then when it gets to 5 minutes left, it will turn red. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what if I just use 30 minutes? You know, what if I just submit at the very last moment? I would not recommend this. I would recommend that you train yourself to do it within 25 minutes, and then you submit it 5 minutes before the submission time is over, because you do not know if there will be problems with submitting. You don't know if it will end up taking you, you know, you think it might take you 30 seconds to submit an answer, but maybe it ends up taking 2 minutes because you're trying to, you know, find the right file in your file system, right? So don't take any chances. Get used to doing it in a lot of time, because at the end of the day, if you lose track of time and you don't submit it in time, that will not be an acceptable reason for requesting a makeup test. Okay, so remember that you need to do it within 25 minutes or 15 minutes. Do not wait until the last moment. Okay, what will submitting responses look like? There are 3 ways to submit responses. One way is to copy and paste. So let's say that you have a Google Doc open, or you have a Microsoft Word document open, and you're typing in your response into that, right? So once you're done with your answer or your response for whatever exam you're taking, you can either copy and paste it from that document into the into the web portal or the web page that pops up, or you can save it and attach the file as a typed response, or you can take pictures of it. Now, one really important thing to remember is whatever device you start off on, you have to finish on that device. You cannot switch devices. So if you start off on a laptop and you decide to, you know, oh, it might be easier to use my phone to submit it, you can't do that. All right. Now, if you, so what you should do is you should actually test out your tech. There's a demo that's now available. You should test it out. And you should also make sure that whatever you're using, if it's a laptop, then make sure that it won't freeze up, right? So really test your test right now. The other thing is with world language exams, this can only be taken on an iOS or an Android device. You have to download the app. So you need to kind of go and do that. So just to get a little bit more detailed. So this is what, this is what it will look like. Now, if you go to that demo, it'll kind of look something like this. And when you can, I'll provide the link to it, but you should definitely try out that demo, because if your technology does not work when you try out the demo, it will not work next week or the week after when you take the test for real, right? So you need to make sure that you try out the demo. And this is what it will look like. When you do submit something, you can either attach, so you click on this button, or you can paste it. You can click on this button. If you click on attach, you'll have 2 options. This is looking at it from a laptop point of view or a computer point of view. You can either attach the text file, or you can attach photos. Remember, if you're attaching photos, test your transfer method beforehand. So for instance, I have a MacBook and I have an iPhone. So me personally, I would probably prefer to, if it was chemistry AP or calculus BC, I would prefer to probably write it out on paper rather than typing it up. But I would want to test it out. I would want to be able to take a picture with my phone, make sure that my AirDrop is working. If that doesn't work, having a backup, like being able to, you know, email it from my phone to my computer, and then being able to then download it to the right download folder, and then attaching the photos, right? So you need to kind of work all those things out beforehand and time how long it takes, right? That's why you don't want to wait until the last moment. You want to take the 5 minutes to do it, because you don't know what's going to come up. If you don't submit something, that's a 0. All right. So I personally would probably use a laptop or a computer, because then I have 3 options. If you use a phone or a tablet, just remember that you might have to kind of scroll up and down, and that might not be as great. If you have a computer and you have a big monitor, I prefer to have everything open right in front of me. Okay, so how to prepare and access resources. So how you prepare for the test is going to be very, very important. Remember that this test is free responses only, right? So you've got 1 question or 2 questions. The whole test, your whole grade is based on 1 or 2 questions. So that there's not a lot of room for error. And because it is open book and open notes, you might think that's easier. I tended to think whenever I was in college, when I got an open book test, I was a little bit concerned, because that would tend to be a little bit harder, because you had access to all the notes that you could. So it was going to test your knowledge, your ability to apply your knowledge much more in depth, right? So that's the con. The pro, though, is, hey, it's open book, it's open notes. This is the first time that this is happening, right? So really find a way to take advantage of it. So if it were me, then I would have everything laid out. And we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail in the next slides. But really quickly for this, it's open book, open notes, and that's both paper and digital. All right, so if you tend to take notes physically, or if you type everything into a Word document, you are okay to use those notes, okay? It's both paper and digital. These are some quick websites. I'm gonna provide these at the very end as well, but these are important websites and URLs that you should make sure that if you're not familiar with, you do check it out. So number 1 is this AP Testing Guide PDF. Some of the slides in this presentation are pulled directly from this. It's a really great PDF. You should download it. It takes you through every single step in terms of what to do to be prepared for the test next week. I would print it out and have it ready, just so that, if I get stuck on something, I can just look through it quickly. You don't want to panic. All right, next thing, exam dates, units covered, descriptions of question types. Now, hopefully you've all done this, because these tests are next week, but just in case, this link will give you a way to kind of go to the units that are covered and the units that are not covered, and you'll know exactly what to study for your tests. Now, the other thing you can use this for is you can use it to organize your notes. This is the exam demo that I talked about. So if you click on this, then you'll be able to go to that demo and test out your tech. Again, the World Languages app, that's going to be available to download on the 11th. Make sure you try it out, use the practice mode to make sure that it's working if you are taking a language. These are some checklists that they have for each exam. And then some of these also have some formula sheets. AP exam course guides, descriptions. This has access to some free response questions. And then this YouTube link takes you to the YouTube channel where the College Board had a whole bunch of different teachers that they hired to do videos. So this is really great review material. But what I found really useful about this was the fact that, as I was going through and doing this research, I was asking myself, where can I find actual sample problems, examples of questions that might be on the test next week, right? Like what's the format going to look like? How can I really prepare myself to be ready for these? And there's really not a whole lot of stuff out there. And the only place where I was able to actually find anything that might kind of give me a clue to what the questions might look like next week have been in these College Board videos. So when you go to it, when you go to like a specific video, like for example, AP Calculus BC, if you go to that video, you click on the show more, and then most of these teachers will have these links that take you to their Dropbox or their Google Drive where they store the resources or the handouts. And if you go into it, like for instance, this is Calculus BC. This was at the very, very, very bottom. And I found that this teacher had included some sample problems. Now, disclaimer, I don't know if these will, really match the ones next week, but it came, considering the source, considering that this was a teacher hired by the College Board, I mean, this is the closest I got to getting a sense of that. And what I want to know was, what will these free response questions look like? Now, most likely the types of questions that will be on the test next week will be free response questions similar to ones that students have been working with and getting used to all year, right? But I want to kind of know, like, well, what might it look like, and how many parts might it have, and how varied might it be? And so you want to kind of go through and look at this to see if maybe that might help out. Okay, so other things that you can do, with not a lot of time left, it's important to make sure that you don't procrastinate. It's really important to make sure that as you are really cramming, doing kind of last minute reviewing and cramming, that you really work on your stamina and your concentration, your focus. So one method that you can use is the Pomodoro Technique, basically working your way up to 25 minutes of pure focus. And if you can do several different Pomodoros at a time, then this is a way to kind of train your brain. So you can start with 5 minutes, work your way up to 10 minutes. But remember, when you take the test next week, you really have to maximize your time. You cannot slow down. So I would try to work up to, if you're taking one of those tests that have one question, work up to be able to focus and concentrate for 45 minutes straight. And that's going to be hard because we've been all at home and we've been distracted by this and that. And it's really, when you don't have a lot of structure, sometimes it's really easy to kind of get distracted by things. But for those 45 minutes or those 25 and 15 minutes for those questions, you have to be totally focused. You have to be boom, 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 boom. So that's one way to go about doing it. Open book and open notes. So you do not want to have all your notes just in a stack, right? In one stack and not be able to access them if you need to. Now, hopefully you've been going through and preparing the right way. But if I were you, what I would do is I would have all of my notes organized. I would actually go through each unit, because they tell you which units are going to be covered. I would go through each unit. In this case, it's Calculus BC. And then I would have all the different topics under each unit. Again, these are from those course guides that are in those links that I provided earlier. I would have each topic open, and I would just go through my notes and start labeling them, putting sticky notes or just somehow label and organizing them. I would maybe have a pile, each pile, and I would just lay it out in front of me on my desk or on the floor, and with a big sticky note, like this is unit 1, this is limits and continuity. Each pile represents a different one. So as soon as I see that test question and I see, oh, it's a differential problem and it's applying the power rule. It's a power rule problem. If I really need that those notes, I can just grab it and flip to it really quickly, right? So you want to arrange it around you. As you are studying right now, you want to really make sure that your notes are taken in an optimal way, and that you're also organizing it really, really well, right? So the best thing that you can also do is just go through and do lots and lots of practice problems, right? So I would try to go through and do all the practice problems that I could, that have even numbers. That's how I used to study. Do all the different practice problems, because this test next week is going to be all about you being able to do a problem that you see right on, on the spot. Right, and as I go through for your notes, I would create like a study guide, as I mentioned earlier, or kind of like my own personal version of Cliff Notes. These are some notes from when I was in high school and going through pre-calculus. Just whenever I come across like a formula, I write it down in a special part of my notebook. If I come across a practice problem that's particularly hard, I actually copy it into a separate part or into a separate kind of study guide so that the example is right there, and I go through and I annotate exactly each single step so that if I forget, I can access it quickly. And then when I have insights, I just really take time to kind of write it all out, so that if you need to reference something quickly next week, you can do it right then and there, because it's all open book, right? So if it's all open book, then just organize everything so it's easy for you to access things quickly. Cornell note system, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but basically you write your notes here, then you go back and review your notes, and then you come up with test-like questions, and then you go back a third time and you review it, and then you come up with the top high-level takeaways, right? And so by reviewing at least 3 times, you're really kind of embedding it in your brain. And so this is how you might use something like that as you go through a textbook. Let's say that you have a textbook, or you have these PDFs that your teacher gave you, going through and annotating it, like in the margins, just writing out possible test questions, organizing it, maybe calling out key points in in the text that you've been given, taking time to kind of summarize it so that you're kind of pre-processing and doing all this work prior to that test date, so that when you see the question, maybe you've already seen a question similar to it, and you can kind of draw back on your experiences in making these notes to help you with that question, to provide a richer answer. Because who knows what the rubric is like that they're using to grade it. They're coming up with exam grades based on just 1 or 2 questions. So who knows how much detail they're looking for. You want to put yourself in the best possible position. In terms of notes, again, just going back through your notes and coming up with test questions, you can come up with different symbols or different shorthand or just different ways to kind of make key data stand out to you. In this case, and again, I can send this out later if you want. In this case, in this symbolism, double lines are used to indicate main ideas. You can kind of go through and put numbers next to things that are important, and just so that when you're scanning through and you forgot something, things will just kind of jump out at you. And then that's the same thing applied to, like, let's say it's a textbook or notes, just kind of using that same thing to kind of make it easier to kind of break things up and for things to jump out at you. Score release dates and impact on college admissions, and also exam scoring and earning credit. Let's talk about this really quickly. So these scores are still going to be on the 1 to 5 scale. And in terms of when this data is going to be released, when the scores are going to be released, it's going to be about 1 week later than usual, around July 15th. Okay. So this part is a little bit kind of double-sided. I think colleges will be understanding about scores, but at the same time, you're still competing, right? So don't let that make you complacent. If anything, it makes what grade you get in your classes all the more important, right? So don't leave things up to chance. I mean, you want to get a 5, you've got open notes. If you have been studying, I think you can do it, right? You want to get a 5 for sure. You want to get an A+ for sure. And you want to just do everything you can. So you need to do well on these tests. In terms of credit and placement, well, in this slide on the College Board, they've come out with different colleges that have been very supportive of these online tests for the APs. Now you have to check. Basically, you have to check with each institution. Okay, some of them will accept these scores, but there's several different things that you're looking at here. Number one, a lot of times they use these exam scores for placement purposes, meaning will you get to skip out of introductory calculus and go right to multivariable calculus, right? The thing that we usually think about when we think about this is, does this allow me to graduate earlier by having to, by giving me credits, by having to take fewer classes, right? And that, again, will largely vary from institution to institution. You have to check each institution's policies. Like for instance, at Harvard, they've stopped considering some exam, APs for advanced standing. They will consider it for placement purposes, but now you can't graduate earlier because of AP credits, right? And I think they made that change before all this too, but you just have to check every single institution, okay? Exam security and technology issues, do not cheat, okay? It's not worth it. You should know your stuff. Do not cheat. The policy is basically, if you use any kind of work that is not your own, then that would constitute cheating. So you cannot incorporate any work that is not your own. You may not provide or receive aid of any kind from anyone. Okay, so try to have a quiet room if you can. Try not to have other people in there. You don't know what kind of technology they're using, because they are using some kind of technology. In addition, whatever you submit, it's going to be scanned by plagiarism detection software. And if there's, it's going to be shared with your teachers, right? So again, they just don't want people to cheat. Now, a question that comes up, has come up in the past, well, what if I've studied and I've prepared all my notes, but I need to look something up in Wikipedia because I forgot one little thing. Is that going to be considered cheating? So I point you to this. This is what they say. Internet searches will waste your time and put you at risk of exam violation. Basically, for the types of questions that you get, whatever kind of evidence or support you will need to give, like let's say the DBQs, that needs to come from the documents in the DBQ itself, right? So if you come up with a fact from Wikipedia, that what they're saying is that it will waste your time because it might not be relevant and you won't get points for it. Okay, so the best thing you can do is to use your notes and to produce everything of your own, from your own mind, okay? And they will monitor and make sure that people are not cheating. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. We will have Q&A to answer any questions that I wasn't maybe able to get to. But basically, these are questions that I've been asked, will they end up having the SAT online in the fall, the SAT and the ACT? So I've pulled together some different sources. This page, all this information is from, here's the citation, here's the web page that I got it from. Okay, so you can kind of check it out yourself. Basically, if the schools are open in the fall, then these are the test dates that they have set up. Okay, because if the kids can take the tests in schools, that's what they would prefer. But if the schools are not open in the fall, and I don't know what would happen if some schools are open and some are not, maybe they would have some kind of hybrid where wherever schools are open, you need to take it in person. And if they're not open, then you can take it maybe at home on a digital version. I don't know. There's not really a whole lot of information here. But if the schools are closed in the fall, then they've announced that they will offer a digital SAT. What does this look like? No one knows really. So one thing to think about is these AP tests next week and the week after. This is kind of like a it's been called a dress rehearsal. It's kind of like a run for them. They probably want to see how these AP tests next week and the week after go. To see what kind of tech issues, and also to see how closely the exam scores might, if their exam scores are going to be vastly different from ones in the past. So they're going to look at that, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more in the slide after this one. So in terms of the ACT, currently, this is what it looks like. They still have the June 13 and July 18 tests up. I didn't see anything about those being canceled yet, but obviously we have to watch it very closely. And then after that, then there's September 12, October 24th, and December 12th. They have now there might be some confusion because originally the ACT was supposed to have digital tests starting in September of 2020. But these digital tests were designed originally to be taken in, either the school or some kind of test center, right? So the environment is very different from taking it at home. So again, we don't know what testing at home will look like yet, but both the SAT and the ACT, they have both said that if the schools are closed in the fall, they're going to have some kind of test online available at home, right? So the only place where I could find any information about the ACT being done at home was in this New York Times article right here, where it's talked about the SAT, and then right after that talked about, the ACT also said that they'll provide digital testing in the fall if necessary. Okay, so we will stay on top of it. We will continue to monitor it. The issues about having the test at home are these. Number one, if we do have an SAT or an ACT taken at home, is it valid? Because how do you compare a test score that you get from a student who took the test at home to someone who takes the test in a proctored and controlled environment, right? Can you compare the two? Is it a valid test score, right? And also, if it is a at-home test, Is it going to be the same length? Is it going to have the same number of questions, or is it going to be shortened or truncated like the AP tests? Right, so these are really, really big questions, because these are vastly different environments, and will they be able to compare them? And then what colleges will ask then is really, well, if we look at the SAT and ACT scores from, at-home testing, will that really tell us something meaningful about the student? Or will we just kind of, some colleges have become test optional for, during this temporarily during this pandemic, and they've said that we're not going to require that students submit SAT and ACT scores, right? But that's really a really, really small window. Now, most of these colleges have been very careful to say that if you can take the test, if you are able to take the test, you should take the test. Like Cornell, for example, they have like a lot of information about like, if you absolutely can't take it, then that's one thing. But if you can take it, we really encourage you to take it, right? So we should always be prepared. We should always be prepared to take the tests the regular way, if possible, right? Do not, don't be caught off guard. And then the big question is also fairness. Is it fair? Because some students will have a nice quiet room, a big monitor, they will have resources that make it easier for them to take the test, versus other students who might only have a cell phone to work off of. Will it be fair between the different types of students to have digital testing at home? So lots of the different questions. We will monitor it, but right now, that's kind of where we stand so far. So remember, don't freak out. These 2020 AP exams, if you've been studying all along, and if within this next week or next 2 weeks, if you are still going through your notes, you're still taking notes, you're taking lots of practice problems, you're getting the right help and the right coaching, you can be prepared for these tests, and you can do really well in them. Okay, so it's all about preparation. Do not freak out. Keep calm. Study on. Be like Zen Dog here. All right, so remember, at C2 Education, we believe in your potential for greatness. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Go to to our website, c2education.com. We are offering classes all throughout because we are committed to helping our students do the best they can to get into the best colleges that they can. All right, so again, this is the slide where all the information is. Feel free to take a picture of this if you need to. But that's pretty much it for my presentation. I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm going to